Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Bradley Valenaki. Thanks for your company. Tonight, we continue on from where we left off last week, which is customary land registration. And I'm privileged to have with me in the studio Ms. Logea Nao, a research fellow at the National Research Institute in Papua New Guinea. And she's been doing some work with regards to this important topic that we were discussing. Thank you for coming on to the program.
Thank you, Bradley, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in the discussions around this important subject and also to address the public on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so customary land. You've been doing some research on this and with regards to voluntary registration. First of all, let's start with the basics. Customary land. What drove you as a researcher to actually look into this subject?
Thank you. Customary land, as we would all appreciate, is a very important development issue. And at the moment, it's a very challenging area to do business in. It's also a very challenging area to do research in. But as you would appreciate, all of us Papua New Guineans claim to own land in this country. It's an issue that we hold very dear, very close to our hearts. Its research informs us that 97% of land, of total land in Papua New Guinea is still owned by customary landowners, with 3% of them already under state control or in private hands under private freeholds. So you can understand that because most of us Papua New Guineans still own land, we hold that very close to our hearts, and it's. I'm actually privileged to be in a position to contribute to the discussions and debates around customary land, especially how we can improve access, mobilization, protect the rights of customary landowners, not just in the towns and major centers around the country, but also especially in the rural areas where majority of the land is situated. So grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
Good. Okay, so we talk about customary land, and like you rightly said, our people hold close to their hearts. But in this day and age, it's important that people register their land, and one of the process is voluntary customary land registration.
That is correct. Before we get into voluntary customary land registration, I thought I should, at this juncture, point out that it's common knowledge that in Papua New Guinea, we have two forms of societies. We have the patrilineal society and we have the matrilineal society. In patrilineal societies, this is where land is inherited through the patrilineal lineage, or where children follow the father in terms of their rights to own, access, and use rights or access land. In the matrilineal setting, this is where inheritance follows the matrilineal lineage. So the children follow the mother in terms of their use, access, and ownership, as well as beneficiary rights to land. Those rights I just mentioned are the different set of rights that in any society that people can exercise. So there's ownership rights, there's use rights, there's access rights, there's benefit rights, beneficiary rights that people can exercise over the use and control and management of their land. Having said that, I think that naturally leads us to how people can best register their customary land. Let me also point out that the process that is currently being advocated for is voluntary. So it is one of the options available for customary landowners to register their customary land. At the moment, it's a two-phase process. First phase is the ILG phase, or Incorporated Land Group phase. This is the phase in which customary landowners are given the opportunity to allow them to formalize their land ownership So by registering their interest on customary land, it allows them to formalize their ownership, and so that others that are outside of that landowning unit, whether that be a clan or a tribe or a family unit, it allows parties that are outside of that formal unit to engage with them in a formal and legal, over formal and legal transactions. So that's the first phase of the process. Let me also point out that by getting an incorporated land group or ILG certificate, that is not the title to the piece of land. This is only the process that recognizes formal ownership. The next phase has a set of processes. This is the land registration phase. This is where, after incorporating your land group or formalizing your social unit, landowners are then given the opportunity to obtain a title over a portion of land that they want to release for development or commercial purposes, whether that be for the state to use or investors, foreign or local investors to use for commercial opportunities. So basically, there are two phases in the process of registering your customary land. There's the ILG phase and the land registration phase. And both those processes are currently administered by the Department of Lands and Fiscal Planning. There's a director for incorporated land groups and a director for customary land leases division. So in a nutshell, that's what the current processes are. And as I said earlier on, it's a voluntary process. So landowners have that option to voluntarily register their customary land.
So you've said all this information in a nutshell, probably in 2 or 3 minutes, but in actual fact, it takes a long time in actually trying to achieve these 2 pointers in registering land.
Absolutely right. From the study that we did, from the research that we have just conducted, also from the 2005 National Land Summit, which was the inaugural land summit, under the leadership of then Minister for Lands, Honorable Dr. Pukatemu, and the 2019 National Land Summit under the leadership of, again, then Minister for Lands, the Honorable Justin Tachenko, where in the 2005 summit there were 54 recommendations, out of which 47 of those were looking at improving land administration within the Department of Lands. 6 of those were on improving and giving customary landowners the opportunity to develop their land, to release their land, and 1 was based on improving or speeding up the process of resolving disputes around customary land. Having said those, in 2019, the challenges from the 2005 summit up to that point, we could see that the challenges were still re-emerging. In fact, a lot more challenges where there were issues around special agriculture business leases. That's another area for probably topic for another day. There were also issues around increase in unscrupulous dealings on customary land, illegal transactions being allowed to be exercised on customary land. And this is where landowners, both landowners but also other interested parties were engaging in transactions that were not legal, that were not recognized in law. And so these are some of the reasons why the summit in 2019 came along. And of course, this work that we have just completed and released came about. One of the key findings of this report actually is that voluntary customary land registration at the moment the process is very long. It's quite tedious, it's cumbersome. There are lots of requirements in the process that have to be met by the landowners. And because of the different requirements, there are high associated costs with that. And not only that, the process at the moment is centralized in Waigani. So one of the recommendations in the paper is for the process to be decentralized to the provinces. So the provinces, the districts, the wards can administer that process, because most of our people still live in the rural setting, especially in the wards, in the districts. And so they need to be able to see and feel that these processes are made available at their level where they are. And also, of course, the land is situated in the districts and provinces. So I think it would be ideal for this process to be handled by the authorities on the ground at the local level, at the subnational level, so that that's in my view, and the research also tells us that that would be a way to improve the process.
All right. Discussions with Logea Nao, a research fellow at the National Research Institute regarding customary land registration. We'll go for a short break and come back on the other side with more. Welcome back. You're watching Infocus. Again, discussions around customary land registration. Now, before the break, Ms. Nao, you mentioned some of the recommendations as a result of the research that you did surrounding customary land and customary land registration. Such services to be accessed probably in the provinces and the districts where they are. That's really important for us because many Papua New Guineans don't have the luxury to come all the way to Port Moresby.
That is correct. As you rightly pointed out, and as I mentioned earlier on, the current process is centralized in Waigani. And so for any interested landowners that want to participate in the voluntary customary land registration process, we'll have to travel to Port Moresby to access those services. The research, one of the recommendations in the research is, again, for those processes, those services to be made available for starters in the provinces, and resource permitting also made available in the districts and eventually at the wards, so that people can readily access those services in their localities. And also, one of the key requirements in the process is for land investigation reports. This is where the Customary Land Leases Division of the Department of Lands and the landowners, as well as provincial and district authorities that work in the area of land administration, also the landowners and the neighboring or landowners, groups of people that own land that share boundaries with the landowning unit that wants to register their land, are expected to go on the ground to do, in preparation to do the land investigation. They need to walk the boundary. And I think that's why the research rightly points out that these services need to be, you need surveyors on the ground, you need valuers on the ground, you need ILG officers, customary land leases officers to be based in the provinces and districts, so that these sorts of processes are not seen to be done in Waigani. It's done in the locality, in the provinces and districts, and even down to the wards, so that people feel that they are part of that process. They are actively participating in the process. And so I think in some ways that also helps to minimize disputes around customary land, which is also another issue that the research covers.
Of course. You mentioned disputes for the registration of ILGs and, of course, completing the second process. Both processes involve disputes in between.
Yes, that is correct. There are provisions in instances where disputes arise. There's provisions for these disputes to be addressed by the appropriate authorities. In the ILG phase, there's a 30-day objection period. This allows for landowners from within the landowning unit that wants to register their land, but also parties that share boundaries with the group that wants to register their land. Also in the customary land registration phase, which is the second phase of the process, there's a 90-day objection period. These are statutory requirements, so they are written in law that customary landowners that are keen to engage in the process will need to comply with. This is so there are two types of issues. There are internal disputes. Internal disputes are those that the incorporated land group or the landowners amongst themselves can address within their own setting. These are issues such as issues around so there are use rights. So there might be issues where one of the landowners from within the landowning group is not happy. Those are the sorts of issues that can be addressed internally within the ILG setting. One of the requirements under law is they need to have a dispute settlement authority. So this is a group of about 3 or 4 people that need to be from within the group that can preside over these sorts of issues and address those disputes internally. There are also issues, for instance, where parties outside of the landowning unit raise issues around boundaries. So there can be issues around land boundary, or disputes around land boundaries. These are the issues that then can be taken to the formal process, where first and foremost they need to go through mediation. So there are 3 mandatory attempts at mediation, failure to which it will need to be escalated to where mediation at the moment is handled by the Village Court and Land Mediation Secretariat, by the Department of Justice and Attorney General. If that fails, then they can go into the local land courts. There are provincial land courts. This dispute resolution process, it is administered by the magisterial services. So there are provincial land disputes committees at the moment that are being rolled out in all the 22 provinces, where these sorts of disputes can be addressed. The rationale behind that is to ensure that disputes are minimized, because at the moment, one other area that is being that has emerged from the research is that customary land leases are not recognized by the banks and financial institutions in the formal sector as security to extend credit to our landowners or investors that want to do business on land. So one of the main reasons is because of long and protracted disputes over customary land.
All right. You're watching Infocus. We'll go for a short break and come back on the other side with more of the discussions. Ms. Nao, we spoke about the disputes before the break. Do our people here in Papua New Guinea, do you think, from your research, understand the process of customary land registration?
Thank you, Bradley. I think that's a very critical point that you raised. The research indicates or informs us that the voluntary customary land registration process, at the moment, there's a need for public awareness. A lot of our people across the country, especially in the rural areas, but also in the urban settings, in our towns and provinces, even some of our public officials, public servants are not aware of the processes involved. So I think there's definitely a need for more awareness. The government needs to channel funding into awareness so that our people are made aware of not just the process itself, but also the requirements in the process, because there's several requirements. Some of the requirements include the landowners will need to engage a surveyor to do a formal survey over that land. They will need to engage with the National Mapping Bureau to do a sketch map. They will also need to do, this is in no particular order, but those are some of the requirements. They will also need to, for each individual that is part of an incorporated land group or that are interested in being part of an incorporated land group, they will need to provide a birth certificate. And you can understand there are currently challenges with accessing those services, birth certificates and NIDs in the especially in the provinces and districts. And so those are some of the challenges. These are some of the requirements, but there are also challenges that come along with not just accessing those services, but also administering the services in the provinces and districts.
And it's a costly one too.
It is. I mean, there are lots of, as I said earlier on, there are lots of different processes involved in the 2 phases. Some of the requirements I've already mentioned. And at the end of it, most of the landowners will have to fly to Port Moresby to access those services. And the different, with surveying is a very costly exercise. And so the process expects our landowners to participate in that process and pay for surveyors to access those surveying services. I think one way that can be costs could potentially be subsidized or costs could be minimized is for our provincial governments and even our local level governments to be better coordinated, so that even some of our PSIPs, DSIP, and the funds that our district development authorities have access to can be channeled through that process. So our landowners, because at the end of the day, these government funds are meant for service delivery on the ground.
That's one form of service.
So that's one form of service. In fact, if these funds could be channeled through those, I'm not saying give all the money to registration of customary land, but if that could be intentionally planned for by our DDAs, by our provincial authorities, by our district and ward authorities, I think that will go a long way in assisting our landowners to participate in the process. Having said that, I think surveying especially that service needs to be made available we need provincial surveyors on the ground to do the actual work, but also that, in my view, that will go a long way in reducing the costs. And if that could be complemented by support from our provincial and district authorities and our national government in terms of our subnational government funding, I think that will go a long way in assisting our people.
True. So from the start of the process in trying to register customary land to the end bit, which is the certification bit, from your estimates, how much would it cost in terms of monetary value?
In my view, having observed the process, I think it would be anything upwards of 10,000. And I haven't had the opportunity to engage in that process, but already people who have engaged in the process, but also those that administer the process. These are our officers, our government officials at the department, but also in the provinces this is the feedback that we have been receiving through this process, that it's a very costly exercise. So you're looking at anything above 10,000, probably 10,000 would be minimum, or, that might be a very conservative estimate. But it definitely involves thousands of kina.
True. So what would your advice be to the customary landowners out there?
I think if the research already clearly points out that there are benefits of engaging in the process if you do decide. Again, as I said earlier on, the process is voluntary. It's one of the options available for customary landowners to register their customary land. If you do decide to engage in the process, I think that's a step in the right direction. Yes, there are challenges, that some of which have already been highlighted through this medium, through this forum and discussions, but also there are others. If you're keen, you can have a look at this particular report and other associated reports that the Institute has published. My advice to landowners would be, I would encourage you, because there are certainly benefits, one of which is it promotes exclusive ownership. What do I mean by that? By registering your customary land, it allows for you to exercise, it allows for your ownership to be recognized in law, because in a modern setting, this is the basis of modern legal transactions, where you need to have a formal title to engage with investors, whether those investors be local investors or international, even to do business with the state, with the government, where even if it's instances where there's compulsory, land is compulsorily acquired, you need group of landowners to be organized and to have a formal legal title, so that allows them to get a better deal out of releasing their land for development. And by having that title, it promotes, it protects your land from being taken away by, and it's also a form of protecting your land from those that want to engage in land grabbing, because by having your land formally recognized under the law, then you can hold that piece of paper, and even
it stands in court.
Yeah, even for those that are already engaging in illegal transactions of our customary land. By that I mean transactions that are not recognized in law, or where money changes hands but there's no proper legal documentation, where in future you're not able to trace the paperwork. If you have a legal document, if you have a formal title, if there are future instances where there are future disputes, then you can hold that piece of paper, and this paper can stand in court, and basically your rights are protected.
All right. Look, we've come to the end of the program now, and we thank Ms. Nao for being with us on the program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
If you have comments on tonight's program, you can email us on the email now showing, or you can follow us socially on Facebook or on our Twitter pages, or you can watch this program a little later on YouTube. From all of us here, stay safe. Bye for now.